Hello students, myself Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma. I am teaching Constitution in Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. Today we are here to discuss religious freedoms and secularism. What do we mean by secularism? Do we mean accepting religious diversity? Or do we mean imposing dogmatic conformity? It is what we are going to discuss today. Today we are going to discuss what is meant by the concept of secularism in India and what is the Western concept of secularism, and also to see the secularism and religious freedoms ensured in various international documents like International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, idea of secularism under the Indian Constitution and the impact of 42nd Amendment on that, and religious freedoms guaranteed under the Indian Constitution along with the religious freedoms guaranteed in US and Australian constitutions. So coming to the topic, first of all let us understand what is meant by the concept of secularism. In India we find that secularism is referred to as dharma nirapekshta, which means religious neutrality, which means religious tolerance, which means sarv dharma sadbhav, that means equal respect theory which the country has adopted under the Indian Constitution. We respect each and every religion, but then if we see the Western concept of secularism, which hovers around liberty, equality and neutrality, liberty to choose one's belief, liberty to convert, choice to follow one's belief, to convert one's beliefs, equality, that is no one to be discriminated on the grounds only of religion, and neutrality, which literally means constructing a wall between the church and the state. If we see the American and the US constitutions, we find that a wall is created between the church and the state. Whereas the Indian concept of secularism is not confined to neutrality. It does not construct any wall between the state and the church. Rather, if we look at the Indian Constitution and the laws prevalent in India, the Constitution is not anti-religious. That is why perhaps the word secular was not used when the Constitution was initially enacted. Rather, we have that equal respect theory. We have personal laws in place. Therefore, the state is regulating the personal laws of various sects and various religions. There are reservations on the basis of caste. Therefore, we find that in Indian context, the word secularism is not used in the manner in which it has been used in the Western world. If we see, in India, secularism does not mean hostility to religions. It refers to a state where political power and religion are kept apart, and state does not adopt, it does not propagate or identify itself with any religion. The citizens have equal freedom to profess, practice and propagate a religion of their choice, to convert or not to convert, to follow or not to follow, to practice or not to practice, to profess or not to practice any religion, and an assurance that they shall not be discriminated on the ground only of their personal belief in a particular region, on the basis of a particular religion, or that they belong to a particular denomination. That's what the concept of secularism means. Before we trace the idea of secularism under the Indian Constitution and the religious freedoms granted under the Indian Constitution, let us have a look at the provisions contained in various international documents like Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides everyone has the right, everyone. It's not saying every citizen. It says everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship and observance. Therefore, we find that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, very clearly guarantees, very clearly provides that everyone should have the freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and that one can change his religion without any fear of punishment, that one can profess his religion without there being any discrimination, one can propagate any religion without there being any fear of discrimination. If we look at International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ratified by our country also, Article 18 of that International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights reads, everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. The right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or the belief of his choice, and freedom either individually or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in worship, observance, practice, and teaching. It says, no one shall be subject to caution which would impair his freedom to have or to adopt a religion, belief of his choice. It further reads, freedom to manifest one's religion or belief may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, morals, fundamental rights, and freedom of others. The covenant binds the state parties to undertake to have respect for the liberty of the parents, and when applicable, legal guardians to ensure that the religious and moral education of their children is in conformity with their own convictions. Therefore, we see Article 18 that very clearly provides that everyone shall have the right to freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and everyone should be allowed to propagate and profess his religion without any limitations, except it recognizes that the limitations on the exercise of one's right to religion can be limited by law. As we see in India, reasonable restrictions can be placed. Therefore, the covenant itself recognizes that right of the state parties that they can impose reasonable restrictions, but those reasonable restrictions must be by law. If we further look at the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 20, Clause 2, it says that any advocacy of national or religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence shall be prohibited by law. That means when we talk about freedom of religion, it does not mean that we will be making anti-religious propaganda. It does not mean that we will be hurting the sentiments of others. It does not mean that we will be spreading religious hatred or racial hatred. That is barred under Article 20, Clause 2 of ICCPR. Now, let's have a look at the US Constitution. The First Amendment to the US Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Therefore, if you see the First Amendment to the US Constitution, that bars the state from making any law respecting the establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. You find that the First Amendment has very clearly erected that wall of separation between the church and the state, that the state shall not make any law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And if we see various decisions of this US Supreme Court, we find that by virtue of 14th Amendment Equality Clause, the secularism principles have been held to be made applicable to various provinces, various states in the US. If we look at Article 6 of the US Constitution, it bans religious tests. If we look at the last paragraph of Article 6 of US Constitution, that says, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. That means under any public office under the United States government, you cannot discriminate a person on the basis of religion. You cannot conduct any religious test that if you belong to a particular religion, that shall be a qualification or that shall be a disqualification. Therefore, the Constitution very clearly bars holding of religious tests. It also bars discrimination on the grounds only of religion. Now, let's have a look at Australian Constitution before dealing with the provisions contained in the Indian Constitution. Commonwealth of Australia Act, Section 116. It reads, the Commonwealth shall not make any law for establishing any religion or for imposing any religious observance or for prohibiting the free exercise of any religion, and no religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office of public trust under the Commonwealth. So, if we look at Australian Constitution also, we find that the Constitution itself bars that the state shall not make any law establishing the religion, erecting the same wall between the church and the state as is there in case of United States. The Constitution also bars that you cannot compel any person to undergo any religious observance, and you shall prescribe, you shall promote free exercise of any religion. Like its US counterpart, Australian constitution also bars religious qualification, it bars the religious test, that you cannot discriminate a person on the grounds only of religion so far as appointment to various offices of public trust under the Commonwealth of Australian Constitution are concerned. Now let us see what the Indian Constitution has to say. Before dealing with the provisions contained in the Constitution, we must remember that when the Constitution as originally enacted did not use the term secular, the word was in fact inserted by 42nd Amendment Act in the preamble of India, which declared India to be a secular state. It has been held that the 42nd Amendment has made explicit what was otherwise implicit in the Constitution. It is not there that though the word secular was not used in the preamble or in the Constitution, Indian state was not secular state prior to the 42nd Amendment Act. Indian state was secular. There were various provisions in the Constitution which talked of or which provided for the various aspects of secularism and religious freedoms. But perhaps the use of word secularism was avoided because it connotes anti-religious nature, because it connotes that the state is anti-religious, and the framers of the Indian Constitution did not want to give an expression that Indian state is anti-religious state. Rather, if we see the laws prevalent in India, we have been regulating various religious institutions, we have personal laws in place, we have reservations on the basis of caste. Therefore, we can simply say that Indian Constitution is not an anti-religious one, it is not against the religion, but then it is secular, and that is perhaps the reason, that was the reason why it was not inserted in the Constitution earlier. 42nd Amendment, as I said earlier, made explicit what was otherwise implicit. They clearly, explicitly laid down that India is a secular state. But then Indian concept of secularism, as I said earlier, is different from the Western concept. Whereas the Western concept constructs that wall between the state and the church, Indian concept does not. Indian concept is based on Sarv Dharm Sadbhav, that is equal respect theory, that each religion must be equally respected. If we look at the situation in India, various enactments have been made by the Union or by the states regulating various religious institutions, various denominations, and if we see, even the Supreme Court of India has given its verdicts on what constitutes essential religious practice, what does not constitute this essential religious practice. Therefore, we have not constructed any wall. Rather, after the enactment of the Constitution and its commencement, we have codified personal laws for various communities. We have Hindu laws, we have Muslim laws, which have been codified after the Constitution has come into effect. Therefore, we do not mean secularism as an anti-religious state. Rather, we have a equal respect theory where each religion commands equal respect. Secularism, which has been held to be part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution, it in fact is the part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. Now, let us examine in brief some of the provisions contained in the Constitution dealing with religious freedoms and secularism. First of all, let us have a look at Article 25. Article 25, which deals with freedom of conscience, free profession, practice and propagation of religion. It says subject to, it starts with subject to public order, morality and health, and to other provisions of this part, that means fundamental rights, part 3 of the Constitution. That means whatever religious freedoms are guaranteed under Article 25, Clause 1, they are subject to reasonable restrictions which may be imposed in the name of, under the garb of, public order, morality and health. After having said that subject to these provisions, the article lays down that all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience, a right freely to profess, practice and propagate religion. Therefore, a bare reading of Article 25, Clause 1 suggests all persons. Not, it's the freedom of religion in India is not confined, it's not confined to citizens alone. It is given to all persons. They have the freedom of conscience. Conscience here we refer to as choice. They have the freedom to choose their religion. They can profess their religion, they can propagate their religion. If we look at Clause 2, which we will discuss a little later, which talks about that the state can make laws regulating or restricting economic, financial and political or other secular activities which may be associated with religious practices. That means the religious activities and secular activities, they are to be treated separately. The guarantee which is given in the Article 25 clause 1, that is limited to religious activities, it does not extend to secular activities. Subclause B of Article 25 clause 2, that says the state may make law for providing for social welfare and reform, or the throwing open of Hindu religious institutions of a public character to all classes and sections of the Hindus. We all are aware of, prior to the constitution, we had a society divided as it is on the basis of caste, on the basis of religion. We were practicing untouchability, the lower strata of the society. They were not allowed to enter various temples, various places of public, various bathing ghats. So therefore, the constitution empowers the government that it can make laws for throwing open of Hindu religious institutions of a public character to all classes and sections of Hindus. It also enables the government that it can enact laws for regulating the social non-secular activities, and the laws can also provide for social welfare and reform. The perusal of Article 25 suggests that it guarantees 3 rights: equal entitlement to freedom of conscience, a right to profess and practice religion, a right to propagate religion and religious beliefs. When we say equal entitlement to freedom of conscience, that covers not only the choice to which religion you belong, but also to convert. And we all are aware of that various anti-conversion laws have been enacted by various states, and there has been a lot of fuss regarding conversions. The article also guarantees that everybody can practice the religion, everybody can propagate, everybody can bring to the knowledge of people the teachings of his religion, the basic tenets of his religion. If we have a look at some of the decisions of the Supreme Court, the first one I would like to refer is Sharul Mutt case, 1954 judgment of the Constitutional Bench, that is Commissioner Hindu Religious Endowments versus Shri Lakshmi Tirtha Swamiyar, 1954. Now here the court that famously talked about that essential religious practices and non-essential religious practices. If we look at, the court said that well, religion, what is religion, which has been defined as opium of masses by the Socrates. Religion is basically contains the basic tenets. What are the tenets of that particular religion? What constitutes a religion? And the religion can provide ethical codes, it can provide moral codes, it can provide the dress codes, what is to be done, the observances to be done, the ceremonies, all these things can be provided by the religion. But what constitutes essential religious practice and what does not constitute essential religious practice, that has to be on the basis of essential doctrines of that particular religion, which shall be based on, which shall be determined by, of course, by the on the basis of essential doctrines by the courts, that what constitutes essential religious practices. It follows therefore that when we talk about guarantees given in Article 25, they are limited to protection of essential religious practices, what constitutes essential practices and what does not. So far as those practices, those observances, those ceremonies, those rituals which are non-essential religious practices, the protection does not extend to them. If we look at another judgment, this Rev Stanislaus versus State of Madhya Pradesh, 1977, here you find that two states, State of Odisha and State of Madhya Pradesh, they enacted anti-conversion laws. These anti-conversion laws criminalized conversions which are caused by inducements or allurements. It was challenged. It was challenged on the ground that it is basically anti-religious, non-secular laws, on the ground that everybody has been guaranteed under Article 25 freedom of conscience, freedom to choose, freedom to convert. Therefore, making such laws, that is against the constitution, that is unconstitutional. But the Supreme Court of India upheld about the laws, stating very clearly that right to freedom of religion does not comprehend within itself a right to compel somebody to convert his religion. It does not include within itself that you can induce somebody else to change his religion. Of course, anybody can change his religion, but then we have to respect the other religion also. We cannot compel somebody by inducements or by allurements to convert to some other religion. Now, if we look at this 1962 judgment of the Constitutional Bench, Sardar Sayyidna Tahir Saifuddin Sahib versus State of Bombay, 1962. Here, Bombay Prevention of Excommunication Act 1949 was under challenge. Now, if we see this Bombay Prevention of Excommunication Act, the act prohibited excommunication on all counts, including on religious counts. The court came to the conclusion that so far as power of excommunication is concerned, excommunication from religion, it is, you cannot take away that power, that is part of the religion. It is, this power cannot be curtailed, because religion includes within itself to decide which person shall be, what is part of religion, what is not part of religion, who are practicing, who are not practicing. Therefore, the court by majority of 4:1 held that the act is violative of Articles 25 and 26 to the extent it takes away the power of the religious heads to excommunicate a person on the from a religion. It is worthwhile to mention the 2014 judgment of the Supreme Court in Vishwa Lochan Madan versus Union of India, where fatwas issued by the Muslim community, they were Muslim institutions, that they were challenged, where a woman was raped by her father-in-law and fatwa was sought by a stranger on the ground that she is no more a wife, she cannot be a wife under the Muslim law because she had cohabitation with the father-in-law, and the fatwa was issued against the women. The Supreme Court of India has struck down the fatwa, but then if we see the decision of the Supreme Court, whereas it talks about the religious autonomy, but also it has said that strangers cannot obtain fatwa. And if we analyze that judgment, one wonders whether fatwas can be got by the relatives, by those who are concerned in that incident. Therefore, if they obtain a fatwa, would that be taking away the rights of that women? Therefore, we have to reconcile the concept of secularism and the religious freedoms on one side and individual rights on the other. Having discussed whatever is laid down and what guarantees are given in Article 25, let us see some of the restrictions which can be imposed on the right exercised under Article 25, which we have discussed earlier also. I would like to refer to last two, laws providing for social welfare and reform. Therefore, the government may, having its focus on social welfare and reform, make laws where it can impose reasonable restrictions. You find that under last two clauses, law providing for throwing open of Hindu religious institutions and laws regulating non-secular activities, various enactments have been made, and there is an increasing governmental interference in the form of legislations managing religious institutions. Let us now deal with Article 26, freedoms of religious denominations. Whereas Article 25 gave a religious guarantee of religious freedoms to individuals, Article 26 gives guarantees or gives rights to religious denominations to establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purposes, to manage these denominations have the right to manage their own affairs in the matter of religion. They have the right to own and acquire movable and immovable property and to administer such property in accordance with law. It is worth to mention here that though right to property has been taken away, it is no more a fundamental right, though it's a statutory right, it's no more a fundamental right. Still, Article 26 contains that religious denominations have the right to acquire the movable and immovable property, and they have the right to administer such property in accordance with law. If we look at Article 26, first of all, what we need to examine is what is meant by religious denomination, and in Shirur Math case, the matter came up for consideration by the court. So, the Supreme Court had the occasion to determine what is religious denomination. It gave three ingredients in that Shirur Math case of 1954, that is collection of individuals having common faith, having an organization, and designation of that organization by a distinctive name. Article 26 also lays down that on the exercise of freedoms by these religious denominations, reasonable restrictions can be imposed under the name of public order, morality and health. Let us have a look at some of the important decisions of the Supreme Court of India. In SP Mittal versus Union of India 1983, the question before the Supreme Court was whether Auroville Society and Auroville Township, they were religious denominations and religious institutions under Article 26. The court said the Aurobindo Society is teaching yoga and they are not practicing any religion, therefore that cannot be said to be religious denomination. In Acharya Jagdishwaranand Avadhut versus Commissioner of Police, Calcutta, year 1984, the question before the Supreme Court was whether Tandava, which is being performed, whether they have got a fundamental right to perform Tandava on public places. Tandava being performed with a skull, with a damaru and a trident, whether that can be performed at a public place. The court said Tandava cannot be said to be essential religious practice. Therefore, if you see the judgment thereafter, the head of the sect declared Tandava to be an essential religious practice, and the matter again came before the Supreme Court. The court said just by declaration by head of the community, Tandava cannot become essential religious practice to claim protection under Article 26. If we look at some other decisions, for example, in Muhammad Hanif Qureshi versus State of Bihar, the matter before the court was whether the ban on cow slaughter that is non-secular, whether that is violative of Article 26, 25 and 26, because Muslims have got a right to cow slaughter on Bakrid. The court said the ban is not unconstitutional because it is not an essential religious practice of Muslims to have cow slaughter on Bakrid. So therefore, if we see the various line of decisions given by the Supreme Court, we find that though it is the court which will determine what are essential religious practices and what are non-essential religious practices. So far as essential religious practices are concerned, they have been guaranteed that everybody can practice them, but so far as non-secular practices are concerned or essential practices are concerned, they are not exempt from they can be restricted. And who will decide what are essential religious practices? The court came to the conclusion that they shall be decided by the court, but then they shall be decided by the court on the basis of faith, on the basis of religious doctrines contained therein. So let us examine another aspect of this freedom of religious denominations to manage their own affairs vis-a-vis some state regulations. If we see the Dargah Committee versus Hussain Ali, the question before the Supreme Court was that the Dargah Khwaja Sahib Act 1955, which provides for the Constitutional Committee to to manage and regulate Dargah. That committee did not give any reservation to members of Muslim community belonging to Chishtiya sect, and it was accordingly challenged. The Supreme Court came to the conclusion that even during the times of Akbar, the state officials were managing Dargah, and therefore appointment of committee is a non-secular function, is a non-religious matter, and therefore it can be regulated by the state, and state is competent to enact the law. We find that in Shirurmat case also similar observations were made by the court. In Srimad case, Srimad Athiraja case, the question before the court was that the state has made an enactment wherein they have provided that the priest to be appointed, that priest shall obtain a proficiency certificate from a recognized institution of the state. The question was whether it is interference in religious matters, whether the state can make such a law. The court said the appointment of priest cannot be said to be a secular, cannot be said to be a religious practice. Therefore, we can safely say that Articles 25 and 26 provide for various tenets of secularism under the Indian Constitution. The constitutional provisions clearly establish that everybody has the right to freedom of religion, a right to establish, every denomination has the right to manage its own affairs, to acquire movable properties, and also to manage its property. Though we see that under the Constitution, right to property is no more a fundamental right, though it's a statutory right. But then the religious denominations can manage their property, though the management of the property is not an essential, is not protected to that extent as an essential religious practice is, and therefore it can be regulated by the state. Let us now move on to the next part, that means Article 27, which says that freedom from payment of taxes for promotion of any religion is given to everybody. That means no person shall be compelled to pay any taxes. the proceeds of which are specially appropriated in payment of expenses for the promotion of maintenance of any particular region or religious denomination. The plain reading of Article 27 suggests that the state cannot impose any taxes for promoting any particular region. But then if we see the language, the ban is only on the imposition of taxes. Fee can be levied. All of us are aware of that legislative competence to levy taxes and fee, that is, these two are separate matters. Article 27 only bans levy of taxes, levy of fee is not banned. Secondly, that though the state keeps itself apart from religious institutions, but then it can give grants to the religious institutions so far as it deals equally with all the religious institutions. Moving on to the next part, Article 28. Article 28 says that religious instructions in educational institutions, in institutions which are maintained wholly out of state funds, that cannot be given. If we analyze Article 28, we can categorize educational institutions into three categories. Those institutions, educational institutions which are run wholly out of state funds. So far as these institutions are concerned, religious instructions are barred. But then the second category of institutions which are run by the state but they are established under any trust or endowment. In these institutions, religious instructions can be imparted voluntarily if the trust or the endowment so prescribes. There is no bar on providing or imparting religious instruction in these institutions. So far as the third category of religious institutions educational institutions is concerned, that means those which are aided or recognized by the state. Here religious instructions can be imparted voluntarily. Anybody can attend those religious instructions, but no person can be compelled to take part in religious instructions. But one must distinguish between imparting of religious instructions and teaching or the academic pursuit. If we look at DAV College versus State of Punjab 1971, where the Guru Nanak Dev University established in its Guru Nanak Dev University was established and it provided for pursuing of academic career in teachings and philosophy of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. The question was whether the state-run university is promoting a religion. The court said we have to distinguish between imparting of religious instructions and academic pursuit in the philosophy of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, which cannot be said to be promoting any particular religion. Therefore, we find that all the provisions contained in Articles 25, 26, 27 and 28, they aim at establishing India as a secular polity. The constitutional provisions clearly bar that state shall not discriminate between various religions, that the state shall not promote any religion, that everybody shall have the right to profess, practice and propagate his religion. No person shall be compelled to pay any taxes which are meant for the promotion of any particular religion. Thank you.